Welcome to Career Connection, the podcast where we connect rare disease patients, educate medical professionals and the public, and advocate for for research for the clinical for the 95% of rare conditions still lack FDA-approved treatments. I'm your host Joanna, and today this week's episode is on July 18th. Following closely after World Airway Day, which was recognized on July 10th. Dedicated to raising awareness for rare and complex airway conditions and that are often misunderstood or misdiagnosed. It's the perfect time to spotlight a family navigating not just an airway disorder, but also a rare immune condition, a complex genetic mutation. My guest today is Keyundra, a devoted mother, an advocate, and the author of the children's book Zaire's Big Feeling about feeding. Her son Zaire was born with Laryngomalacia, a condition where soft, floppy tissue above the vocal cords collapses into the airway when the child breathes in, making it hard to breathe and feed as a baby. Zaire also lives with neutropenia, a rare blood disorder, where the body doesn't have enough neutrophils, a type of white blood cell critical for fighting infections. Without these cells, Zaire is highly vulnerable to airborne viruses and bacteria. But the most complex part of his medical journey is TNRC6B, a gene mutation in the gene error association with a rare neurodevelopmental syndrome that can affect multiple areas of a child's life. In Zaire's case, it has contributed to autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, speech and global developmental delays or failure to thrive, and behavioral conditions such as oppositional defiant disorder or obsessive compulsive disorder, and bipolar disorder. Keyundra is here to share Zaire's story and the medical, emotional, and everyday realities, and how she channels her experience into advocacy and authorship. Let's start with Zaire's story. When did you first notice something was different, and what were the early signs that led to his diagnosis?
Yes, ma'am. Zaire's journey actually started from birth. He was born at 35 weeks, barely 35 weeks. And I remember after I had woken up, because I ended up having an emergency C-section, which is a cesarean birth. My mom was in the room, and it was during COVID, so the hospitals were locked down. Any other case, like I probably would have had like my grandparents, my dad, and everybody in there because of the extremities of the labor. But the only person that could come in was my mom. And they allowed Zaire's dad to enter after we found out how severe things were. But I remember waking up and it was different from when I had my daughter because my child was not in the room with me. And that's when the nurse and my mom talked to me and they told me that they had to take Zaire up to the NICU because he pretty much died at birth. And they brought him back and they ended up having to do CPR and resuscitate him twice. So then we realized that he wasn't breathing well. The nights that we spent in the hospital, he's like struggled with his oxygen desatting and he could never pass his newborn hearing screens. So when we finally got released to go home, we were not even home for a good 48 hours. And I remember holding him and my dad had went back to work. He was working nights and I remember he came home on his lunch break to check on us. And he was trying to figure out how come I was not asleep. And I was telling him like something's not right. This is not like, a postpartum like scared mommy thing. Like this is my mom intuition telling me something's not right. And I would look and his lips would turn gray and I could see like a tracheal pull every time he would try to breathe. So after that, we took him to the emergency room. They told me it was newborn tachy apnea and he would grow out of it. A couple of weeks later, my grandmother was watching him while I got some fresh air and I was trying to like get myself like moving around and things. And she called me, told me to get back to her house. Zaire had stopped breathing. But my grandmother, like my mom and my sister, has years of experience in the medical field. So he was with someone who was safe. We took him to the doctor then. That doctor said the same thing. Oh, the emergency room told you that it is tachypnea. Yeah, he'll grow out of it. By this time, Zaire is going on 3 weeks old. I take him back and I request that another PCP saw him. And right when the next doctor saw him a few days later, she walked in and was like, nope, he has Laryngomalacia. I heard it down the hallway. He has stridor. That's why he has that squeaky sound. And I was like, she didn't even come in and assess him. Like she walked in and knew exactly what it was. And she was like, yep. And like as she's getting ready to explain to me exactly what Laryngomalacia was, she was getting Zaire on the little baby like table to weigh him and get everything done. He stopped breathing. And she told me, you're not leaving. You're not going home. I'm calling the ambulance. And we are from a small town. So the nearest Children's is like an hour away. She would not let us leave until she called for an ambulance to come and carry us to Children's. And Zaire ended up having his first emergency surgery that night at 3 weeks old.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I just think it's forever going to be a push and pull. I don't know anyone in my life who has a perfect work-life balance. And maybe the balance is the push and pull. It's a lot to dig on there, right. But I have so much of myself. And at work, I'm going to give my 100%. And at home, I'm going to give my 100%. And sometimes it pulls in either direction.
Right. Their saying is, I am tired.
Yeah.
I am stressed. And my husband says that we don't have sex anymore. And that happens in the 30s, 40s, 50s, not so much in the 20s. And when you have time for yourselves, you have time for everybody else. So it's important to do self-care.
Scary, to say the least. Zaire was born with Laryngomalacia. What did the diagnosis process look like, and where did it affect his feeding and breathing early on?
After that first surgery, he ended up coming home. I ended up having to buy like a little foot monitor to make sure that I watched his oxygen, and he wasn't improving. So he ended up about a month later having a second surgery, which is a supraglottiscope and MLB, where they go down, they assess the windpipe, and if needed, they do another corrective surgery on it. And I remember them showing me pictures. But during this second surgery on his windpipe, he also had to have his lip tie corrected and his tongue tie corrected. So it was basically 4 surgeries at once. After recovery from that surgery is when we started seeing issues with the feeding. I remember they told me that there was like a slight chance that kids would have like a reaction to the surgery. So when we got Zaire home, he would scream at the sight of his binky and at his bottle. So we were thinking maybe he has an infection, maybe he's not healing right, something of that sort. And after he went 24 hours with us, like basically force feeding him with like a syringe and anything that we could find at home, we took him to the hospital. We ended up being in the hospital for what felt like a month at that time. And the doctors at Children's told me at this point, we are pretty much force feeding him. He's not wanting to eat. We have like fluids and IVs in him. The only way he's going to go home is if he goes home with the feeding tube. And me being me, and I was like, okay, so what does this like look like? Is my baby going to have a nurse around the clock and things like that? And they were like, well, unless you are confident as a mom that you can handle this on your own. My mom was with me. We called my grandmother and we were like, okay, this is going to be a family effort. And I remember my mama looking at them and saying, she's going to get it done. And they brought the doll in to teach us how to insert the NG tube and how to remove it. But also during that stay, they ended up running more tests. And we found out that his Laryngomalacia also caused sleep apnea. So we ended up going home with oxygen and a feeding tube.
Wow. So what do you do if he just stops breathing during the night?
His oxygen machine usually beeps when he starts to desat to a certain level. But I have learned Zaire will be 5 in October. So now my body has become trained to the times. Like I know he's going to have like apnea attacks. And he also has night terrors because of like the behavioral side of things. So before he even goes into that like deep slumber to where his body is going to like fight against him, I'm already up and I'm staring at him and I'm alert. But before then, I remember not sleeping because I was so scared. And I was like, okay, so what do I do? He's hooked up to all of this stuff. And it was a fight. Trying to get a toddler, like people make jokes about how hard it is to change a toddler's diaper because they want to squirm around. But trying to put a nasal cannula in a toddler's nose, especially at the time when he had the NG tube in his nose at the same time, I remember being so scared to where I would call the entire family in before bedtime and was like, okay, everybody assemble at my house. You take an arm, you take a leg, and somebody distract them. We got to get them strapped down.
Yeah. So, see, neutropenia adds another layer to complexity. How did you first learn about? How did you first learn he had it, and how does it impact your daily routine and level of caution?
It was during I would say he was about 4 months old when we found out about 4 months old exactly when we found out about the neutropenia. And it was during another hospital stay. And at this time, I love our team at Children's, but the mommy guilt in me had got so festered up. I was like, every time my child comes here, they're admitting him. We're here for weeks, and they're sending us home with a new diagnosis. And around that time, he would get sick. And it was started with like the projectile puking and his body shutting down. And it was scary because he was so tiny for his age due to him not wanting to eat anything. And I was like, okay, what's making my son sick? Like, of course, all of like the worst case scenarios start going through your mind. And after they ran blood labs, they told me that it was neutropenia. And we had to go through this week to where he had to go we started with every 2 weeks he was getting labs done. And then after the every 2 weeks getting lab done, it started with him getting labs drawn, like him going and getting his finger poked to get a CBC done twice a week. And seeing your baby go through that, seeing him scream and stuff, it was dreadful for me. But we had to, like, even still today, we have to watch him, especially around the season change when colds and flu and all of that are around. Zaire is one of those bubble babies, and his apnea and all of that has brought on asthma. So his asthma flares up along with this. And it's like he's one of those, we've had like extensive panel testing for like antibodies and things that our bodies might be immune to, but Zaire can walk outside and something like in the air that we would never think of can cause him to get sick, and a common cold affects him worse than COVID. So we have to like really be cautious about who comes around us during those seasons and like where we take him. And I'm constantly cleaning, and he is all boy. So he's always trying to roll around and get dirty and all of that. So it's always like being a cautious mom and staying ahead of the game.
It's a little bit harder.
Yes.
Yeah. And then they came the TNRC6B diagnosis. How long did it take to get the genetic explanation, and what was your reaction when you finally had a name for what was happening?
That diagnosis came out of the blue. We were not looking for it. It found us. When we did genetics testing, neurology is who actually suggested that we go see genetics down the sidewalk. And the purpose for the genetics testing was to see if we can find out what was causing the neutropenia and what was causing the laryngomalacia and all of that. Because like seeing him when he's still tiny for his age because of the failure to thrive, but he was super tiny then. And at this time, we were like, yeah, we got to figure out the medical complexities, like the history behind this, and see if we can get this baby going. So they were like, let's do some genetics testing to see if like something is causing him to be so sickly. And they told me it would take about 6 to 9 months for results to come back. Results came back at about 7 months. And I remember being at work and I was so nervous because, and it's a shame that like moms who live in my world, we check my chart like some people check social media. So we're always like, okay, what email, what results are like coming in? Like, yes, the app is right there. And I remember getting a my chart message. And I tell people all the time, it's always like the battle of the mind when I'm at work and I get something like that. Cause I'm like, do I check it at work? If it's the results that I don't need to be like, my mind is not going to be focused on the kids that I need to be working with. And I remember on my lunch break, went in the office with the nurse at work and we opened them together. And I was like, what is this? And she Googled it and she was like, yes, I've heard of it, but like, I don't know much about it. So I was like, okay, we're going to wait till geneticist reaches out. And they told me what it was. But at the time, it made sense. But the mommy in me, because I've had years of working in the clinical setting with children with autism and things, I was like, okay, my child, like, what? And one of my friends had already told me, you saw the early signs, because he would do things that would like kind of make you question, especially if he was already showing like early signs of like sensory aversions to like his environment and stuff. And there was a time when we thought he was having seizures, and we found out that he was actually stimming, but since he was delayed in mobility, his body couldn't like move around and jump, and his hands flap like other kids, and instead of flapping his hands, he would twirl his wrists. So after we got into the process of like really learning what this meant, it made sense. And I think it was like my work history is what made me a lot calmer and prepared to handle it. But it's definitely one of those things to where it's different when you're a mom versus when you're dealing with somebody else's child as an ABA therapist or as a teacher, because the game changes when it's your own baby.
Yeah. Seizures are definitely something that can play into this, and so I mean it does sound like something that would happen with it, especially with the genetic mutation. It's not uncommon for even especially grand mal seizures or to play in. Is he having seizures now?
He has not had one since he was about 16 months old.
Mm-hmm.
But with how severe his asthma is, that is one thing that I always have to hound in on people, especially now that he is a big kid and he's at the big school because he's in pre-K. And this is his last year in pre-K. But me working in the school district now, that was one of the reasons I transitioned to public school, because he was transitioning also. The
Yeah.
nurses are like amazing and they are like on the clock, even like when people are like, oh, it feels good outside, they're like, nope, he has his hat so he won't overheat. We have his fresh water. We're outside with his inhaler. We have his pulse oxygen on, because I'm like, you never know like what can trigger something like that.
Mhm. Let's see, for listeners who may not be familiar with, who may not be familiar, how would you describe TNRC6B, the G mutation syndrome in plain terms?
I am still learning. We have been on this road it's been about 4 years since he got his diagnosis. And because it's so rare, I am still learning and diving in. And thanks to like social media and Facebook groups, I'm blessed to have connected with parents who have older kids. But it's pretty much like Zaire's mutation is mosaic. And the best way that his geneticist painted it out to me, it's dominant. So there's like no backing down, like it's there, it's gonna stay. And she was like, just think about his genes being this like beautifully painted picture. And in this picture, you have like these little blotches of like red paint that just pops up. And she was like, that's what his body looks like. And I was like, oh wow. And she was like, every now and then there's like to where like your genes cross, and one of his ended up deleting and mutating. And in other words, it just causes like the neuro side of his body just decided to swap and do its own thing. And it causes him to have like oversensitivity to certain things. His behavior sometimes changes. And he's just one of those people that you have to play it by day, play it by minute, play it by ear, what type of mood he's going to be in and how he reacts to the world and to his surroundings.
Mhm. This one mutation affects so many aspects, so many areas: speech, development, behavior, growth. Uh, um, which challenges have been the hardest to manage so far?
Of course, the feeding, which is how we ended up writing the children's book. It played a huge role in that. And because of feeding being such an issue, our growth is not where someone would say he needs to be. And we have had to like re-alter our own perspective of it to where we no longer compare Zaire to like what the standards say in the chart. Because if you look at it, they'll tell you, oh, the average 4-year-old boy should be this tall and weigh this much. And we're like, well, we ain't there. So we're like, okay, we weighed this much last month. Now we're here this month. We're growing. And sometimes we don't grow. So it's just like, let's get them to eat so we can grow more than what we did the last time we came to the doctor. And of course, that 3 nature stage in every kid's life is always like people say terrible twos is a doozy, but it's when they become 3 natures and their personalities start to form. Zaire took it to another level.
Yeah.
And he does his own thing. So we have days where it's hard to unwind, hard to calm down, and I have to step back a lot of times and understand with a kid who has like the OCD and the ODD, they honestly cannot regulate what's going on because their brains are so wired up in the moment that they have gotten overstimulated that they don't process that the situation at hand has, caused them to be upset or even remember why they're upset. They just know they're upset and they're not getting their way at the moment. And with the speech delay, he can express himself very well. But as far as sometimes processing what's being told to him, that's where we struggle. And I have to repeat myself 1,000,001 times. Sometimes I have to calm down and break it down slowly. Visuals help a lot with us. If he can see it while you're talking to him, it helps a lot better.
So, is he verbal at all?
Very, very.
Wow. So he actually knows what he's saying.
Yes. And I thank God that we had therapists who hounded in on certain things early because when he was about 8 months old, his speech therapist wanted to introduce him to sign language. But because of my background and work and my grandmother's background, we actually introduced him to sign language at 6 months. And then with like things being, this is the 2020, so you have like much upgraded technology to where you can have anything at the touch of a button on a tablet or a cell phone. So we downloaded apps on his tablet to like get him into like the AAC world, and it helped. And the thing that actually helped him find his words were when we introduced him to sign language, we just didn't teach him the signs. We would mouth the words while signing the words so that he could repeat and mimic. And honestly, repeating things and mimicking things is what taught him to speak better, because he's one of those, he loves music. He loves cartoon Paw Patrol. He's like hyper focused on Marvel superheroes right now. Like, I have to watch anything Marvel like a million times a day, because once a kid like him gets hyper focused on something that is the world that they live in, and instead of bringing him out of that world, I use it to teach him.
Mhm. Have doctors or geneticists explained what TNRC6B is to you?
They have, his geneticist has explained it, but when they tested Zaire, apparently he was like one of three that Arkansas Children's had seen with the genetic mutation the way that his is. So they were like, it's rare to us. We've seen it come through, but like the way that his was set up, because with it being like, Zaire does not have like the facial deformities and things that you might see other kids with. And once you get through his little quirks, and once you actually allow yourself to learn to communicate with him past his like delay in response and all of that, Zaire is highly intelligent.
Mhm.
So it's like, he's like, everything about it is very rare and unique to where they even look at him, it's like, we're trying to figure him out. We're trying to figure this out, because like we don't see it all the time. So we're just going through the process, and we're consulting with other people on how to handle him and what to teach you.
Yeah. So it's imagine it from his end of things, and we're trying to. You're trying to figure me out. I'm trying to figure you out too. You know?
Yes.
So let's see. Is there a patient community registry or advocacy group yet for TNRC6B families?
I have found a support group on Facebook, but I have not found anything locally in the, especially in the Southwest Arkansas area. And that is
Mhm.
one of the things that I have been like hounding on, because I would love to connect with like more parents and families that are like close to us, who I
Yeah.
can like talk to, especially parents who have kids who are a little older than Zaire. Because I would love to learn, like, I need to know y'all's story so I can know how to prepare myself.
Yeah. One thing, if you guys ever want to get a treatment on this, keep track of what is common with the different condition with the different people who have it in that group, because that is crucial for treatment, to know what symptoms are common amongst the people who have this condition. And so that's pretty much the only way you're going to get anything out of it. But there's one family I know of right now where it's even less common than this. That was probably a couple podcasts ago, but he's and not the only one I've seen in that group, but they actually have, there's multiples that actually are trying to raise over $1 million to get gene therapy done. So more power to him, especially when there's only 6 people that have it and spread out all over the world. Zare's diagnosis includes conditions like autism, ADHD, and possibly ODD, OCD. How do these challenges interact, and how have you learned to support them? And how have you learned to support him through them?
With his neurodiversity, the autism, ADHD, ODD, all of that in one, I always have to I think about it, and after I look back on my career choices, I ended up in the field that led me to what I would be doing as a mom. So I have to reassess myself in the moment and be like, okay, if I were to step out of mommy mode, and if Zaire was a child that I had in ABA therapy, or a child that I was teaching in the classroom, how would I handle this situation without having the mommy emotions attached to it? And sometimes that is how we get through. Like, I have to disassociate mommy and go into therapy mode with him. And then there's a lot of, our home is set up differently, especially his room. His room is his safe space. That's his sanctuary. So when you come in his room, it might be set up like a therapy clinic, as some people say. And even certain parts of our house, the kitchen has to have like a safe space so he can stay in the kitchen to even want to eat. Zaire is one of those, he's a busybody. It's hard to keep him still. Even when he had his G-tube in, it was hard to keep him still. I had to learn about like the stomach belts to like protect his belly and all of that. And there was a lot of like consulting with doctors and doing my own research. When he gets overstimulated, it's all about assessing the environment, knowing what's going to overstimulate him before we take him places, and lots of explaining to other people what is going on so they won't look at him and be like, he is a bad child. His mama can't control him, or he's mean. And I'm like, no, he's not mean. He's just overstimulated, because he has his moments where he shuts down and he can go mute, and people might think he's nonverbal, and it's because he's not comfortable in his environment, or he's just tired out. People tire him out and things like that.
Mm-hmm. What therapies or support services have been most helpful for Zaire?
OT and speech have been our most helpful, which Zaire has gotten physical therapy throughout his life. And one of the things that I did not know even exist until I had Zaire was feeding psychiatry. And he actually saw a feeding psychiatrist for about a year and a half that was outside of his local speech and feeding therapist. We would go to the clinic that diagnosed him with autism and see a feeding psychiatrist there. And it was like an enhanced version of mental health therapy just for feeding therapy.
What is it? Tell me more about that.
Basically, she's a feeding therapist, but she also has like a background in mental health, and how like Zaire's speech therapist, who does his feeding therapist, hold on, babe, told me to research the difference between a picky eater and a problem feeder. Because when you grow up in small towns and you're not like educated on like things like sensory aversions and all of that in a cultural background setting, when a lot of people see kids like Zaire, the first thing they'll say is he's a picky eater. He'll grow out of it. Make him sit at the table. Make him sit there. And I'm like, it ain't, nope, it's different, totally different. So like after doing that research, and even like with the background knowledge that I learned from like I'm one of those parents, I don't just send him to therapy. Even when I'm at work and he's in the therapy kitchen, I would like set aside times where I would make sure my lunch break aligned with the time that his therapist will pull him out of the classroom, so I can go in there and learn and be hands-on as a mom, so I can do my job at home to make him, thrive even more. So as we learned, and I was like, okay, so this is something that's like, it's neurological. It's his brain really telling his body, food is scary. We don't like food. Because after we've gone through the surgeries and like even his oral motor delays, he started outgrowing them and his jaw structure and stuff became stronger. He still was not wanting to eat. And what the psychiatrist came in and done, and it's taught me how to like look at it from a mental health perspective. and to work with it with like allowing him to like, you know, engage with it without being over anxious and working through the anxieties of being around certain foods or even in kitchens and around certain smells.
So it's like sensory disorders.
Yes.
Yeah. So what kinds of things will cause a reaction kind of thing?
Zaire, pretty much every food, especially meat. We have like a good 6 things that we eat. So yes, he is one of those. When I tell people and they're like, nope, we'll send him. I'm like, Zaire is one of those kids. And now that he has like grown into like that independent personality and like the ODD is definitely there, he will try his limits with people and he does not care who you are. He's one of those, you can try to get me to eat if I don't like it and if I feel it's not safe. We don't throw our food or try to knock it down anymore, but we will definitely look at you and walk away.
So you said he has a problem with meat. Have you tried going vegetarian or vegan?
I have tried like a pescatarian
Mhm.
meal with him, and I found out that he doesn't like salad. He doesn't like vegetables. He will eat fish. Now we have gotten to where he will eat fish, and we went through a phase to where I had to peel the skin off the fried fish. But about a week ago, we took my grandfather out to eat for his birthday, and Zaire ate fish at the restaurant and had no problem with like having the skin on it. And that's pretty much all he ate. And he drank his lemonade. Now, if you give him some lemonade or some soda that has like a little fizz to it, he's in heaven. And he likes his crunchy chips and crackers. He's a very crunchy, salty texture person.
So how do educators and care providers typically respond when you try to explain the full scope of his diagnosis?
Um, I have been blessed to have a pretty good team at Children's to like when it comes to Zaire, I can like message them on my chart or I can call, and they are very responsive. With the early stages of going through, after we had that one PCP who like sided with the emergency room and was like, nope, he'll grow out of it. The second PCP who knew right off the back what it was, she has been amazing. Like anything we need referrals for children's and testing and all that, it's done immediately.
Yeah, you never grow out of a recognition. It's with you for life, unfortunately. So your children's book, Sarah's Big Feeling about feeding is such a creative way to to address a hard topic. What inspired you to write it?
I had a friend of mine tell me that I needed to write a book because they knew that writing is like a hobby and a passion of mine. I've been writing since I was like 6 years old. But at that time, it was after Zaire's story was featured on the news the first time during World Airways Week for World Airways Day, and he was 2 years old. And I was like, no, because I was going through like the mommy grievances, and I don't think people understand with each surgery, each doctor's appointment with a new diagnosis. Parents, we grieve just a little bit because there's like a part of our child that we have to like come to terms with like, oh, he may not be able to do this when he's older, or like there's something else that we have to revamp in our lives. So I was going through that phase and I was like, I'm not gonna write a book. I advocate enough on social media. Y'all have seen his story on the news. But then after like having a few parents reach out to me and hearing their stories of their kids being diagnosed with laryngomalacia or their kids like not eating the way that they should, I was like, you know what? I've told my side as a mommy. Nobody can tell their story better than a child can. So I wrote a children's book from a child's perspective because once you realize what their bodies actually go through, you can understand them better. It's not just us parents making it up, saying this is what my kid does. This is my kid's body showing you and illustrations and all of this. And this is like his therapist in the book also like having to like work through the social emotional process of it to let you know this really happens.
What do you wish more people understood about feeding difficulties, especially when they're caused by airway or sensory issues?
From the airway perspective, you have to be cautious. The wrong thing going down his windpipe at the wrong time can lead to something fatal. You have to understand that when a parent is not wanting just anyone around their child during feeding, during sleeping moments, or even just leaving their child alone, and it's not the parent being overly protective of being a helicopter mom, that is life and death, literally life and death. So we have to take that into consideration. From a sensory standpoint, not every child is being a defiant picky eater. This is something that is beyond like being in a childhood phase that they grow out of. This is an actual illness that affects their body from a neurological standpoint. It is something that causes like a mental disruption. And even like when you think of things like depression and anxiety and how it can shut down your whole body and your mental process, this affects them in the same way it causes anxiety and depression for some kids. When you're forcing them to sit at the table with things that makes them like the sight of certain things can literally make a child sick to their stomach. You can cause a lot of trauma. So you have to be cautious and know what is safe and what is unsafe.
How does Zaire respond to how did Zaire respond to the book when has it helped him?
He has grown to, even when he sees something that he does not like, to express himself in a calmer way. Sometimes we still have those moments where he's riled up and it's too much. And as a mom, that's for me to understand, because he has those moments where it is hard for him to vocalize it, especially when he's overstimulated. So that's when I have to know those nonverbal cues, when I see his body language change or when he's getting riled up, and I have to like let him know it's food, it's okay. And I have to remember that beyond the sensory part of it, because he might not want to touch it, he might not want to smell it. Just because he's young does not mean that he doesn't remember the traumas of the medical part of it, to where I have to let him know that you won't get choked.
Yeah, I can't imagine how many times he must have had to perform the Heimlich maneuver.
Yes.
As a mom, that hurts. I've had it performed on me before. As a mom and an advocate, what's been the most empowering and part of you? What's been the most empowering part of this journey?
Seeing other parents want to speak out and share their stories, and seeing other parents want to come together and have the communities to where we can get together and be like, you know what, even when we feel like we're alone, we're not alone, and we can support each other. I'm from a small town where there's no red light, no Walmart. Like, we are a small country southern town. So to see communities want to educate themselves and learn that, hey, this is a problem that was swept under the rug because nobody was educated on it. And there are more kids like this than you can ever imagine from the neurodivergent side. And educating ourselves as a community, from therapeutic clinics to even public schools, for those kids who are older and their diagnosis like flew by, and they were just like, they had certain resources but they didn't get the initial help that they needed from the sensory standpoint, to where nobody understood them. Now you have ways to go back and re-advocate for those who didn't have extensive therapies like Zaire. And to see my own family learn to be supportive and hands-on, and to see these kids like Zaire thrive. And to where like years ago, especially in the 90s and in the 80s, where someone like Zaire would have been counted out and people would have said, oh, they will never be able to do this or live a fully functioning life or play sports or even work, to where these are some of the brightest kids that we have. They just have their own little complexities, but when you get into their world, they can do whatever and probably teach us how to do things because they can teach us how to live life differently and see life differently.
What surprised you most about either about Zaire or about yourself?
I'm sorry, what was that?
So what has surprised you most either about Zaire or about yourself?
Zaire has surprised me when it comes to the both of us because he is one of those little boys. He is strong-willed. And when he has his moments of, even when he is being mischievous and sometimes upset, he's smiling. So to see a little boy who has gone through now 14 surgical procedures at the age of 4 still want to get up and call himself Bruce Banner because he can turn into the Hulk, or want to like be so like into like this Marvel world and like have the spirit that he has. And as a mom, something that I just like putting in a G tube or an NG tube and being up, like doing all the medical things. I took a different route for a reason. I went into the behavioral health side of the medical field while my mom, my sister, and my grandma were all on the nursing side because I was like, I could never do it. I can't do the blood and stuff like that. But it came home to me. So having to like handle this as a single mom and have the strength to like handle it alone, even with the support of my family, it's just me and my two. So to be able to balance work life still and mom life and to support my oldest, who is an amazing big sister because Zaire is her little brother and she's protective over her brother and he's protective over his sister. But he has shown both of us how strong we are. And I can look at him any day when I think I'm having a hard day. I can just be like, you know what? That little baby has been through some stuff and he can still get up and power through. So I can too.
What advice would you give to another parent just starting down a similar diagnostic path?
It's not going to be easy. And every day is not going to be rainbows and sunshines. It's okay to grieve and it's okay to cry. But after you cry, remember that those same tears that you cry because you're scared are going to be the same tears that you cry when you're happy to see your child thrive. And it's okay to advocate for your baby. Even when you feel unheard, find another doctor that's going to hear you. Find your community and your people who will support you, and know that one day that your baby's story is going to be the same story that saves another baby's life.
Right. Are there any specific doctors or hospitals, hospitals or therapists you recommend to other families?
Yes, to anybody in the Southwest Arkansas area. I live by, even like if you have to travel, because I know I have met families who have traveled from out of state. Arkansas Children's Hospital is amazing. I can't stress that enough. Zaire has had some scary moments in surgery. And to know that there have been times when they have had to like resuscitate my baby during surgery. But I got my baby back and I was able to take my baby home, even from like the clinical doctors, because we see 12 specialists and he has a huge clinical team and complex care. They are family. They're not just doctors and nurses and therapists that we see every 4 to 6 months. They are family. So I strongly recommend Arkansas Children's. For those who are around any Pediatrics Plus clinics, Zaire has been blessed to have the dream team of therapists when it comes to rehab therapists, from PT to speech to OT. There was a time when we didn't know if he would walk. He did not start walking until he was almost 2. And then there was a time where even after he learned how to walk, his feet were still wonky from like the mobility delays that he didn't wear shoes. So he was just walking around, little happy barefoot baby. We've had some angels sent our lives through Pediatrics Plus and Arkansas Children's Hospital.
How far do you go for care?
Um, I was actually employed at Pediatrics Plus, so Zaire was able to go to work with me and get all of his therapies. But for our medical appointments at Children's, we drive an hour and a half. And I am okay making that drive because I know
Yeah,
he's being seen by the best.
yeah. You're lucky you can do care within the state, because there are quite few people who do travel cross country for care.
Yes.
Um, what communities and or resources have given you the most support emotionally?
Um, I was able to like join through a mom that I met at Children's. Actually, our kids were in surgery at the same time. And she told me about the Laryngomalacia group on Facebook supporting Laryngomalacia, and like being able to like, even though these are people that I have never met in person and we stay all like in different parts of the world, having that social media community has been life changing, especially during COVID, because a lot of this that was taking place with Zaire in his younger years were like during COVID when we were shut down and like shut in the house and couldn't go anywhere. So I couldn't have friends coming over, especially with his neutropenia, even with my own family. My brother was in college, so you didn't want like, and he was like going to college for football. So even when he would come home, it's like I'm meeting him at the door, spraying him down with Lysol. So to have like that group of people that you can connect with, and you understand that your babies are going through the same thing, so we know what buttons to be cautious with, and we know what the other person needs, especially like when you have somebody else that pops up and like, hi, I'm new to this group, you know how to welcome them in.
Yeah, there's with the groups, especially with the nonprofits. I mean, if you can, if you can be around the other people, a lot of the nonprofits do have group meetings, and so they will. A lot of them do have get-togethers, but if you have a situation where you can't be around each other, that's a little bit difficult to do. But so it all depends on what the limitations are there. Um, but if it's an airborne thing and you have a hard time with being around the airborne, it might be a little bit difficult to get around the other people, but um, most of them will do some sort of a get together. Um, but let's see. Um, looking ahead, what's next for you and Zaire? Will there be more books coming? Are there advocacy goals or on the horizon?
There will be more books coming because feeding is not the only thing that Zaire has big feelings about.
Yeah.
If you've been around any child with autism or sensory processing disorder, you know there are a lot of things that can trigger us, like going to the barbershop for little boys, or even like being in loud and bright environments. A lot of times my grandmother can't stand it. Today, my house is pretty bright because we're on this podcast, but I have days where I have to like keep the calming lights on and keep like the actual lights off. And I'm like, because it keeps Zaire calm. And she's like, it's too dark in here for me. I'm older. But yes, there will be more books. My goal is to start my own podcast, an author podcast, and also like build upon like starting advocacy groups in this area to where parents can come and be comfortable, and I can introduce them to resources that I have been privy to over the years.
Yeah, that doll that you have, it looks almost exactly like there. It kind of you could actually, it looks like something you take on Good Morning America and teach them how to use.
Yes.
But I mean, that would be great if you wanted to start a channel on that type of thing. Because there's a lot of people who don't know that really need to know it. Um, let's see, how can listeners follow your work? Um, uh,
They can follow me on social media. I'm a millennial, so I have pretty much every social media outlet from Facebook, Keyundra Dominique, Instagram, Keyundra Dominique. I am on LinkedIn, Twitter, which is now X, Keyundra Thompson, TikTok, Keyundra Thompson. And they can also follow my website, KeyundraThompson.com.
So what about getting involved? Anything that you need help with, or
I am open to all ideas and all opportunities of advocacy and getting involved. I've always, even before being a mom, and I think it was because I was raised in like the church setting to where we were taught servanthood and giving back in general. So that part of me just like elevated when I got into this world of parenting and seeing the need. So I'm always open to like learning more, expanding, and being hands-on in any area that I can, especially when it's to help. I have a soft spot for babies and for all kids. So if it's to help another family be at ease, I'm always open.
Keyundra, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your Zaire's incredible story, your resilience and as an advocate, and your creativity as a author are deeply inspiring. Zaire's big feeling about feeding gives you a much needed voice to children facing medical and emotional challenges that many never see. And this is a reminder that love and advocacy go hand in hand. To other listeners, if this episode touches you, please check the show notes for links to Keyundra's book and the resources about Laryngomalacia, Neutropenia, and TNRC6B mutation syndrome. Even if you never heard of these conditions before today, your awareness helps create a more informed and compassionate world. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to my channel, Libra Chef, and comment below your thoughts for support. Your thoughts or support. If you're listening to the audio on the audio version, you can send me a text link directly in the show notes. I'm always always love hearing from you. You can follow Rare Connection on Facebook, X, and LinkedIn, and visit rareconnection.org for more stories and resources. Well, I had to dissolve the nonprofit organization. This podcast and community remain just as committed to connecting rare disease patients as families educating the public and medical professionals, and advocating for better care and awareness. And as always, if you or someone you know is in emotional crisis, please reach out. The 988 Suicide in Crisis Lifeline is available 24/7. You can call or text 988 or chat online at 988lifeline.org. You are not alone. Thank you for tuning in. Stay rare, stay resilient, and I'll see you next time on Rare Connection.